Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is the third episode of the Mentor of Men podcast. And today I have here Damien Bohler. Damien Bohler is an Australian guy that I once discovered through another podcast called Deeper by Sophie Josefina. He was a guest there. And I really enjoyed that podcast. I can really recommend you find it. Look it up. Because it made me follow him, and eventually I signed up for a course he's teaching, which is called The Fundamentals of Authentic Relating. It was so good that I signed up for the second one as well, and it really changed the way I relate in a really, really nice way. But today he is my guest. I've been a guest on his podcast, which was about being securely single. It was a great talk as well. I really enjoyed that. I just love talking to the guy, and I think he has a lot of wisdom in him. And he's changed the world in a very nice, powerful way. What inspired me to invite Damien today was a Facebook post that he wrote, I think 2 days ago, which was about spiritual dogma. And specifically the first sentence, it really caught my attention. I've got it right here. There goes the camera. It was this: I call bullshit on the polarity teaching notion that men should never bring their emotionality into their relationship and to their woman. Now, I like this. I like when people challenge dogmas. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, welcome, Damien. How would you introduce yourself? Who's Damien? Who's Damien Bohler? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I've been facilitating this work in authentic relating for over 10 years now. I've kind of been facilitating for 10 years now, and really, I like in this particular space, in this particular work, I think of myself as a facilitator, and secondly, a teacher, and also a writer. And kind of instructive writing. I don't really like the term teacher when it comes to this kind of work, because kind of it implies spiritual teacher, and I don't think of myself as a spiritual teacher or a guru or any of those kind of things. It's like I want to bring awareness to things like relating and relationship and attachment and polarity and things like that. Bring awareness to it to the kind of degree that we would think of as like English language or mathematics, or like topics that are just fundamentally important human things to understand and know about. And so I've also recently started thinking of myself as kind of like a relational engineer, a synthesist and relational engineer. So I find that I have I have a knack for synthesizing material, synthesizing across different kind of aspects of the human experience, and being able to find the ways they connect, the bridges between different aspects. And I really enjoy doing that. And then I've seemed to have focused really strongly on understanding relating or relationship. And by relating, I really mean the space between us. It's like, you and I are in relationship in this particular moment. We're having a conversation. There's some kind of relationship. We also have a history that creates our relationship. So we're relating right now, and we have a relationship that's been developed out of our relating. And so I'm fascinated by that. Like, what is relating? How does it work? And how does it create and sustain healthy relationship? So that's really been my focus. And I've been broadening out into other territories that encompass that. So attachment theory is one of the things that has really become really important and to understand for me, because it was something that I realized I kept having problems in my relationships. Like, I knew how to do all the authentic relating stuff, and I still kept coming up against problems. And I realized that there's an attachment, there's a nervous system kind of component to it that we experience when we get triggered or whatever. We're basically experiencing our attachment issues coming to the surface. And then also I really enjoy understanding and exploring masculine, feminine polarity too. And as you've let me know where you'd like to head today, we're kind of looking at a post that I made that actually covers those two topics, and actually looking at the bridge between them. How does attachment meet polarity? How do those two things work together? So yeah, that's it. I'm kind of like a writer, teacher, facilitator, relational engineer. I live in Australia, and yeah, and I've been in the work of facilitating, running this business of evolutionary relating for just over 2 years now, and I don't think I'm going to be stopping anytime soon.
Well, please don't.
Thanks.
I think you're really doing valuable work, and the world needs it. I also love it how you approach what you're doing. I have to admit, like it to me, it feels like it's coming very strongly from like the masculine mind, like that the way you approach the topic of relating and how you want to synthesize different components. It even makes me think about like when I've been a programmer for many years. The way I look at the world it's the same. Like I abstract things away and I put them into modules and I connect them and I interface them to each other. And it's really it's a different way of perceiving the world and modeling the world even, and to really strip it down to very little.
Totally. And that's why I say engineer. It's like I've been recently reflecting on the way that I construct my courses and the way that I think about and dissect and break down relating into skill sets and practices to develop those skill sets. And it feels like a very engineering mentality. It's like, okay, here's how relating works. So let's put all the blocks into place and then we'll get this kind of outcome, and then we'll get variability inside of that. And recently it's really interesting as well. It's like I've been asked by a friend, I'm starting to work in festivals a little bit. And one of my housemate actually is starting to run festivals over here. And he wants to bring me on as the kind of like cultural engineer or the cultural programmer, which is interesting as well. How do we set a festival culture? And I'm like, oh, I love that. I love because it's a facilitation role again, How do I facilitate a cultural tone for a festival? So those are the things that really light me up, that kind of the predictability in human behavior at the same time as fostering increasing amounts of individuality or authority. So it's almost like how do we understand the predictability to the point we can hack it and actually create genuine authenticity and genuine novelty? So it's like if we're running on the unconscious program, it's predictable. If I say an insult to you, you're going to have a certain reaction. If I give you a reflection, you're going to have, and then you're going to have a certain reaction. And if I learn really elegant or nuanced skills to relate to you, emergence will start happening and we'll have a novel experience. We'll go, wow, that was an experience neither of us ever had before. And that to me is the most exciting thing I want. So I want to know, how do I set the conditions for that, in my own life and friendships and groups, and also in my romantic partnership? How do I have a romantic relationship where it's new all the time? There's like emergent qualities starting to arise. I'm like, holy fuck, I'm in new territory. I'm experiencing something with this partner that I've never had, and I'd like my life to continue to unfold that way.
It's amazing. Like I'm already smiling like this when you talk about it, because that's my experience also from the course that I was following with you. I had such simple, powerful experiences that they were triggered by very simple techniques. I couldn't imagine if I just do this, if I just simply reflect or just paraphrase something or summarize something, and instead of talking out of my ass, what happens? And it's like this entire world opens up and totally new experiences. And yeah, it's been very powerful. Yeah, but I think, this is why I think you're onto something. But anyway, let's get to the topic, because we can talk about this forever, I think. Maybe we should do it another time to delve into that. Yeah. But anyway, you had a very strong opening line on a Facebook post this week. And I like it because I like to do that as well. I like to challenge certain mainstream thoughts. But I'm going to read it out. I'm going to repeat it. So what you said is, I call bullshit on the polarity teaching notion that men should never bring their emotionality into their relationship and to their woman. So I thought, let's explore that, because I have to admit, this resonated with me tremendously. A while ago, I was on a psychedelic trip, and I got very, very sad because something really truly occurred to me. And that was that with everything that I was doing in doing my personal development, my self-reflections, my growth, my writing, I felt like a lot of the teachings that we get, and the polarity teaching is a very big topic in spiritual community. In that moment, I felt like, again, I feel like I'm getting handed a sort of a handbook or a rule set of how to be. So, and to me, that becomes, and then it immediately falls, it feels a bit like a dogma again. And I just felt like I just want to undefine me, you know. I just don't want to have like, if I read David Dida, it's like the masculine does this, he should do that, he should, like, there's interesting lessons in there, but it's, again, the trap is it might become dogmatic again. So I wanted to pick your brain on this, because I think you're calling bullshit on something here that is also, to me, it made me relate to my experience I had and which I just described. So yeah, why is it bullshit?
So I see this in some of the teachings around, used to be juicy in our small community. And really, you know, it's like we're really a very small fraction of people in the world who are fascinated by this. But I think that there's a lot of people out there who are hurting. Their relationships are struggling. They can't find the level of both love and eros, you know, their sexual expression that they really want. A lot of women, a lot of men, and there is like a deep need to find a solution. Like, why isn't this working? Why do I keep getting into a relationship, it breaks down, and then I end up hurt? Or why can't I meet a man who does this or whatever? Like, what? Or why do I get turned off by my man? Or, you know, why does she do this or whatever? And so there's these strong problems, and wherever people have strong problems, they look for solutions. And I think that there's a tendency in humans to want the shortcut. We want the fastest possible solution we can get, you know, and I'm guilty of it myself. I want the magic supplement that I only have to take for 1 week, and I'm like, you know, I'm shredded, I lose all my body fat, and suddenly I've got it doesn't work, you know, like, but we want these like magic pill solutions. And I think the same comes to relationship. It's like, here, do this and you'll have an outcome. And polarity seems to be one of those things that's presented that way. It's presented as like, you just do this, men be this way and women be this way, and then you're going to have love and sex forever. You know, it's just going to be hot all the time. And there's this like, and I can feel it. Like I can feel the way I get drawn into that fantasy of like being the man who's like James Bond, you know. It's like, especially the Daniel Craig version, I'm just like stoic, on mission. Women just fall over themselves trying to like get with me, you know, and everything that I do is impeccable, you know, and I'm never fazed by anything. And I'm like, oh, that's really appealing. And, you know, there's a pull for the masculine to kind of want to feel that, like, you know, I think there's a truth in it. So it's like, again, I'm being provocative at the beginning, but I think that there's a truth, and it's really nice to pass out what is truth and what is dogma, and why is it dangerous. So, you know, there's that on that side. The problem is we're not fucking movie characters. We're not one-dimensional characters who just show up and play on a set. We're humans, with challenges, with struggles in life, with ups and downs. We go through all kinds of things, and that's just natural human experience, you know. And one of the things that I notice is that in the polarity teachings, there's this strong thing of men should never be emotional. And if they do, they go and talk about it with other men or somewhere else, and they only show up with their woman in full center, you know, and then she's feminine, and she gets to be feminine and emotional all the time, and she should only express her feminine, and that's how you do it. And if you do that, follow that recipe, you'll have a great relationship. And I'm like, it doesn't seem realistic to me. It just seems, like you said, I feel constricted with the idea of that's how I'd have to show up. I don't feel like I would actually be able to be me. It would be just another construct, a character that I would try and do. And my hypothesis is if I tried to uphold that character for an extended period of time, I'm actually going to start suffering on the inside. I'm going to start creating internal defense patterns that are probably going to start manifesting as narcissism, sociopathy, depression. These kind of things will start arising from the outside of that. So I call bullshit because we're humans and we have experiences. So there's a lot more nuance to that, but I think I'll just stop rambling for a second and see where we go. Like I can talk about this.
Yeah. I totally agree in that. And at the same time, I get triggered by it because I also know guys who are very strongly into their emotions and sharing that. Also with me as a man, or within my men's group, I see it happening. But on the other hand, I also see how women can completely get turned off by it. So like it's not black and white. There's truth in both parts, I guess. And in the end, it's always a balancing act, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing, because it's like, and this is a new nuance that's emerging for me right now, is that so on one side, if we look at this dogma, it says men should be this way, and then women kind of just get to be whatever, right? And I've dated like that, and I've been in that experience where it's been like I'm not allowed to be emotional. I have to hold space for her all the time, and she's completely emotional, whatever. That tends to lead to a very deep entitlement in women. An entitlement that they can do whatever. It's quite immature. The immature feminine really starts to arise in that dynamic. It's like, I can be emotionally expressive however I want, but you can't. You have to hold me in my chaos and my emotional turbulence or whatever, and you just unwavering masculine presence, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful fantasy, but it's a fantasy. But then there's the nuances on the other side. Is it's like if I am a man and overly emotional, it is going to turn a woman off. And there's a reason for that. Like the woman, the feminine is like biologically, it's like she's wanting to be safe, protected. The moment a man collapses, it's like if a bear came through that door right now and you're emotionally collapsed, I'm going to die. That's kind of what a woman's body says when a man starts getting really in his collapse, and he says, I'm actually going to die by you not being able to protect us. So my response when you get emotional is I have to go into my masculine. And the moment I'm in my masculine, I'm talking as a woman right now, you're no longer attractive. Like you're in your feminine. I'm like, get that away from me, which is ironic because she's expecting him to be attracted to her in that. So, that's an interesting nuance there. But, and we may be racing ahead, but we can spend some time unpacking this. It's really about balance, and I'm really trying to collide the worlds of attachment and nervous system understanding with erotic polarity, and both of them are true, but it's like, how do they work together is my inquiry. It's like attachment is going to occur. Attachment issues are going to occur for most of us who are insecurely attached, which in our community is most of us. Securely attached people are not interested in this work because they're already okay. It's just not, so true. Not appealing. Yeah. It's like something I like to say is like, if you're in your 30s and you're single, you're probably insecure, and the dating pool is insecurely attached people. So we're all these insecurely attached people running around trying to date each other and triggering the fuck out of each other and not knowing how to make it work, and going for serial monogamous.
It's not even a theory of yours. It's actual, like, research fact. Like even after 40, like the dating pool is it's almost everybody on Tinder at that age is like insecurely attached.
Exactly. And so
you're fucked.
And you're fucked. Well, not really. And that's why I'm like, I'm engineering my work is engineering a solution out of that, and I'm running the primary experiment on myself. And it's like, all my hypotheses are coming true. I'm like, really, I know what I'm doing, it doesn't mean I don't get triggered, but I'm like, oh, okay, I'm understanding what's happening here. So,
okay. Name me one hypothesis. What is the latest hypothesis that was, became true? Turned out to be true.
Okay. What is it? How you put me right on the spot there. It's like I'm just tracking back my relationship over the past couple of weeks. Well, one of them is that the feminine, when the woman drops into her deep feminine and she actually surrenders into her feminine, it immediately polarizes the man into the masculine. That's been a hypothesis, and that's something that I've observed to be true. When my partner and I are in some form of conflict, she can get really feisty in conflict, and so can I. So we can like butt heads for a while, and it can be challenging because sometimes I'm not quite sure what to do there. And then at some point, she fully goes into surrender, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I'm in devotion. So there's this beautiful polarization that the woman can bring. And this is where I was heading, is it's like we want to balance out, we don't want dogma that creates a should do or must do for either partner, at the same time as we want to understand what are the best practices for having a good outcome. We can't just do whatever we want. We can't just do what we've always done, because we'll keep getting the same results. If my life has been a string of painful relationships and I just continue doing that, all I'm going to get is continuing a string of relationships. Like Albert Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. It's the same with relationships. So I have to do, if my relationships aren't going the way that I want, I have to find a way to do something differently. So it's like, how do we do that? And that's what I'm questioning, because the polarity teachings has this dogmatic solution that I'm like, that's not quite it. That's not quite it. There's some truth here. Yeah, I actually see more damage and harm done by this as scripture than I see potential benefit. Yeah. And so it's like, we need to, how do we break it down? Like I do in the authentic relating. I'm like, I don't, you were in the course, I'm not interested in having prescribed communication tools. NBC is an example of a prescription in communication. It has a big breakdown. When you do this, I say this, and it's like we have this formula for speaking, and all of a sudden you're in this box and you're like, ugh, right? But you learn authentic relating and you learn this set of tools, and it's like you get to use them however you want. They're just best practice tools. That's all. And then you use them in your own identity and formation. So it's the same for polarity and attachment. There are principles that underpin why this is such a compelling theory. And so it's like, how do we get to those principles, understand them, and build ourselves out of them by practicing? And what we'll have is actually an embodied, innate, natural versus a constructed, rigid suit.
Yeah, I think it's a way of opening up. That's what I experienced in the trainings as well. It creates an experience instead of that you're very goal oriented. Like, you want to achieve this, do that. And this is more exploratory. It's you don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to come up, but that is the goal in itself.
And
so,
and the thing is, like the best musicians, and I know you're a musician, you don't become the best musician by only playing covers, like you're just a cover player, right? And so that's what, like, if you follow prescribed dogma, you're just a cover musician. You're never actually going to create art, right? You're not an artist. You're just.
This is exactly my father did that. He was in a cover band, a very successful one for many years, but I never did cover bands. I was like, no, but I want to write music. What use is it just to rerun what other people have been doing? It's way more interesting to get creative.
Exactly. You be creative, you become an artist. And relationship has the same potential, right? We can be artists in our relationship. We make art out of our relationships. And so it's like, but if you're like following a formula, you're not going to become an artist. You're just going to become a replica of the person who wrote the formula. That's all you'll be. Right. And so, like, I'm not interested in that, but I'm like, if there's benefit, like, and there is, if there's something compelling about it, look, Data or whatever, and all these other people, there's something compelling in their messaging. So it's like, what is that that's compelling? How do we reverse engineer that? And then apply a set of practices like you would learning the scales that allows you to find your own creative expression of that. That's what fascinates me.
And I think then we come to the point, which is authenticity.
Yeah.
So that it becomes your own creation.
Exactly.
instead of that
becomes your
you're
own
doing
expression of-
something. Yeah, instead of just following the laid out path, and then at the end
Exactly.
of the path, you think like, this isn't it, you know, or
Yeah.
I'm still not fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and so it's like when we look at the contents of this post, I'm talking about both attachment and polarity. It's like if you learn how to heal your nervous system, you stop getting triggered, right? You stop getting reactive with your partner. And then what starts to come out of that is going to be a more unique and novel experience. You're now in uncharted territory. You're like, oh, I'm not getting triggered anymore. So what's possible? What's possible between us when we're not constantly fighting and fucking, you know, to make up for it? You know, I see a lot of couples around me, you know, they go through periods of fighting and fucking, you know, a lot of relationships like that. They have conflict for 2 days a week. Then they come back together and fuck and feel really good for 3 or 4 days a week. And then they have another fight and they conflict for 2 or 3 or 4 days, you know, or a week or whatever. And it's just this constant cycle. And it's like really taxing on the body. You know, it's like you're constantly in a state of fight, flight, sort of distress, you know, and then the almost frantic repair of that, you know, that's why like makeup sex is the hottest, because it's like almost this desperate, frantic need to like repair, but it's not actually repair that's healing the nervous system. Right. And then polarity is the tension between the masculine and feminine pole. You know, it's like, so how do we, I feel like and my experience is as I heal my own nervous system, my own innate masculinity emerges more and more and more, you know, and the same for my partner. As she heals her attachment by the way that I'm meeting her, and I'm more on the anxious side, which is slightly more feminine. She's more on the avoidance side, which is slightly more masculine. Right. And as we heal that, those constrictions fall away. And what emerges is our own innate polarity, and it's our own unique expression of it. It's not one that I'm trying to follow. I'm not like, right, so I'm the masculine, so I have to do this and say this and everything like that. It's actually just arises naturally. But we do understand the dynamics of that erotic tension. Yeah.
It reminds me, I see the book lying there. It's Master the Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. Have you read it?
I haven't.
That's mind-blowing, man. And what he says about polarity is like the increase of polarity. This is from 1954. This guy was way ahead of us, you know, but he says like we have polarity, we create strong polarity because we desire union. And in the end, like we do want to come together with both parts in ourselves, but we use somebody of the other sex in a way to sort of project that part of us and to refine that self. He even says like in the mythical story of Adam and Eve that Eve was made out of the rib of Adam. It is that it was a part of us was taken out, and in the end we want to reclaim it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. No, go on.
Yeah, what do you want to say? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and it's like to come back into that union, it's like, to me, it's like, how do we do that from a state of consciousness? So the impulse is to go to union. And if my attachment isn't healthy, if I haven't healed kind of my bonding processes, the union that I move towards will be enmeshment. It'll actually be a form of codependency. So I'll move towards an unconscious form of union, which is enmeshment or codependency patterns, where I'm like, I don't know where I am anymore. I've lost all sense of myself in the other person. I don't exist as separate from them. And that's not what we want. And so I love what you're saying there. What he said in the quote is we actually create the polarity. We have a really strong differentiation between self and other, between the man and the woman, you know, or whatever genders that we're playing with. And that sense of differentiation allows us to move closer and closer and closer to connection without losing our consciousness, without losing our sense of individuality or identification with self. And when we do lose it, it's not lost. We're actually moving into a bigger form of identification. We're actually growing our sense of identity beyond the self, you know, into like a superego or, you know, whatever, like more and more developed stages, you know. And I think of the we space that we explored in the course. It's like, you know, we start to become a we, and we start to become a conscious we, you know. Like I think if a couple spends real time, this is one of my hypotheses. This is only just still forming. I don't fully have experiential data on it fully yet, but I have had glimpses of it, that when we're going a little bit outside of the zone here, but when we move towards that sense of consciousness, like maintaining our own consciousness and feeding the consciousness of the space between us, the awareness of the space between us, we have the potential to awaken the consciousness of the space between us, that we as a couple become an identity with a consciousness that is actually formed by both of us. And I think that's something that's very interesting. And I think when we talk about union, I actually think that's what we're wanting. I think that we're wanting to be in something that's bigger than us without losing our sense of self. So how do I be me and part of us at the same time? And I get to have both, versus I'm either, and this is the classical dilemma of attachment, right? If I'm more on the avoidance side, I'm terrified of that. I'm terrified of losing me into we. And I'm like, I'm going to fight to maintain my own sense of self. And if I get too close to you, and there's deeper layers we don't need to go into, if I get too close, I'm going to freak the fuck out and I'm going to ghost. I'm going to bounce. I'm out. I'm not responding to your calls. I've disappeared. I've taken space. I'm pulling away. And then the anxious side is like, I want that state of union so desperately that I'm willing to abandon myself. I'll leave myself on the couch over there and just like dive headfirst into you. And the avoidant goes, no, thank you. So the avoidant runs away and the anxious goes, oh my God, I'm abandoned. And then we just have massive rupture, right? And couples can do that cycle for a long time, and that's not what we want, right?
No, you just summarized my marriage. Yeah.
I think I summarized a lot of people's marriages, right?
Yeah, but it's human. It's human behavior, and I think a lot of the times there's two people, and when you talk about attachment theory, and we have people who are attracted to each other from an insecure attachment style, a lot of the times that is actually what plays out. And with me, I think I'm. Well, certain people have certain theories about my attachment style. I'm fuck all. I have no clue anymore. I thought I knew it. Like in my marriage, I was definitely anxious. After that, people said I was avoidant. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle, and sometimes I move a bit to the edges. I think that what it is for me. But
I actually don't I don't subscribe to the labels as being fixed in attachment. A lot of people go, I'm anxious, I'm avoidant. I'm like, I think we have a tendency on one side, but as we start to heal and those layers unravel, we reveal all of it. We're at the core, we're just insecurely attached. And then we have predominant strategies. So I'm insecurely attached with the predominant anxiousness. But as I healed my anxiousness, I actually find there's a lot of avoidance underneath that, and actually it's often the true. And same for avoidance. Like I said, my partner's tended to be more on the avoidance side, and she wants to resort to avoidance strategies, right? And an avoidance strategy is I want to pull away, I want to go and process on my own, I want to take space. She wants to resort to them. But when she doesn't, and she starts to let herself be more vulnerable and kind of lean into the healing, what she actually finds under is a terror of being abandoned. Her avoidance strategies are to avoid feeling the fear of being abandoned. So she's actually more anxious under the surface. And then once I show up with presence and she kind of surrenders into that, she starts to feel the neediness, like, oh my God, like I don't like feeling this. And, she's going to want to jump back into her avoidance strategy, but part of her work is staying in the fire and burning. And same for me. It's like my tendency is to want to just like be all in. And my work is actually to stay in the burning of like actually enjoying the separation between us, enjoying my time alone and taking care of my own life when we're not together, and that's been my burning. And then I find that actually like there's a part of me, it's like, I don't even want to be in relationships. Like, oh, now I have to lean back in and deconstruct that layer.
Yeah. Also, what you just described, I think insecure attachment, this is my own theory. If you're insecurely attached, make it black and white now. Everybody's anxious.
Exactly.
And people who are so afraid of being anxious, they go into avoidance. Yeah. So like their path goes back. Like if they reverse their path, they go through anxiety again. But still, what I also think is it really depends on who you encounter. Because some people who are very avoidant, they trigger your anxiety. But like if you're if it can be the way around as well. If I have a super clingy girlfriend, I become avoidant. So I think it's normal human behavior. But again, like if we box it in these three categories, it's very simple. Like I'm this and you're that and this is that. And like it explains everything. And it's a nice, it's a good framework. It can really help you to give you some tools to work with. But in the end, like we're so refinedly human and everybody has, if you really want to understand it, you have to dig deeper. You can just apply some simple rule book.
Exactly. Just like we criticize the polarity teaching, I would criticize anyone who dogmatically holds to attachment. There is an attachment community on Facebook that I used to moderate for. I actually had to step away because it was a lot of dogma around attachment. Everyone really strongly identified, I'm anxious and my boyfriend's avoidant and da-da-da-da. And there's just like this rigid, I'm anxious, so therefore you must be avoidant, you must do this, and I need to do this. And it's like, that actually doesn't, that's a strong identification. It's like, I don't want to identify with, I am anxious. It's like, I have anxious tendencies. I have strategies of behavior that we can call anxious, or I have strategies of behavior that we could look at as being avoidant. And I map those strategies and those patterns of behavior. And then I start to do counterintuitive moves and practices to start dissolving that. And if I'm with a willing partner who's able to work with that with me, then we're able to do that together, and we're able to sense make when we're not in the chaos of it, right? Yeah. And the thing about attachment is that it's actually, insecure attachment is an incomplete bonding process. That's what it really is. It's like we didn't manage to both bond and separate from the primary caregiver, pretty much the mother. So our human physiology is wired for bonding. We're actually designed to bond with other humans. That's why we seek out friendships and, community groups and relationships and, puppies and dogs and everything. We want to bond. Like we actually want to bond, right?
No, my son wants a hamster whatever. Now. Fuck.
Yeah. We want to bond, right? Yeah. But if we don't have a secure map for bonding, which is a healthy ability to attach, which is what we did in the first few years, ideally with our mother, if we're securely attached. So a securely attached person, they felt very strongly bonded and cared for and held by the mother. And when they were ready, usually around 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, they start differentiating and separating from the mother. And in a healthy or secure partnership, they're given full space to do that at their own time and their own pace. And they do that, and then they end up with this healthy pattern of bonding. They know how to bond and separate. They know how to maintain autonomy while also experiencing intimacy and be able to move in and out of that. When we have an incomplete map, say, for example, I'm a baby and my mum puts me in a separate room in a cot while I'm still really young, and I cry because I'm like scared. I'm freaked out. I'm like a little helpless baby on my own in the dark, or maybe there's a little hanging thing above me and I'm freaking the fuck out, right? And I'm screaming, and my parents have subscribed, and they used to in the 80s and earlier, to the cry it out method. So my mum just leaves me there to cry it out. And if that happens, so, quick attachment lesson, attachment 101, if that happens and I scream and cry and eventually my mum comes back and picks me up and puts me to bed, and that happens kind of every night, I'll end up anxious. And what that says to me is that I realize that if I scream and throw a tantrum, I'll get the attention I need. So that's what an anxious person does. They throw a tantrum to try and get the other back. Now, if the mother doesn't come night after night after night, and the baby screams, and they literally scream until they got nothing left, and then they go to sleep, and that keeps happening, they'll become avoidant. They'll start to believe that nobody's going to come. So fuck it, I'll be independent. I don't need anyone, right? Now you go have a relationship. It's like really hard to be close because it challenges those internal models. Yeah. Good luck. But the point that I really wanted to make there is that we are wired to bond, and that's why we seek romantic parents. We actually want to bond with the other. So it's like, how do we bond healthily? How do we bond in a way that's going to be, for me anyway, I want it to be evolutionary. I want it to be novel and emergent and have both love and eros, agape and eros, sex and love, be really potent, feel really good, feel good friends, but also be passionately charged with each other. Feel like we're good playing mates, good teammates in constructing something in the world. We're going to bond. Like I'm bonded with my partner now. And if we separated, I'd go through a grieving process because it's challenging to separate from someone you're bonded to. And there's nothing wrong with bonding. There's nothing wrong with attachment. It's only when we can't do it effectively that we end up with a whole bunch of attachment disorders, codependency, and, this anxious, avoidant, vicious cycle that, the extreme levels we call love addiction. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have this feeling for a sort of a tangent here. Well, it's not really a tangent. It's
yeah. Take me there.
When you describe how people can really subscribe to a certain theory or become dogmatic about a belief, it becomes very black and white. So people are like, I'm anxious or I'm avoidant, and they're very, very clear about that.
I'm masculine. I'm feminine.
Yeah. But it really reminds me, when I was training to be a coach, we had to do training on the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really struggling to find my type, yeah. And people were like, "Oh, you're this." It's very clear. But what struck me after a while is like the people that I could really type define quite easily were usually the very pathological people. So, who really subscribe to a type, because in the end they were very easily to recognize because they had very strong characteristics of something. So, would you say that there's a relationship here of people who really subscribe, can really strongly identify with one thing, that they're like, what I also discovered is that people who were very maturely developed, I couldn't type them, so. And I think David Daniels also said that. He was a professor, I think, at Harvard or Stanford. He did a lot of research on Enneagram. And he said, like, it's not a system to put people in boxes. It's a system to make people grow out of them. And what I actually observed is people who did a lot of personal development, I couldn't type define them anymore. So they became less black and white. But they couldn't also subscribe to a certain, they wouldn't identify themselves very easily with a single thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very interesting point. Like I'm wary of both. I'm wary of the people who strongly, rigidly, sometimes even violently defend their identification with whatever it is, a religious faith, an attachment style, an Enneagram type, a human design type. It doesn't matter. Anyone who's like so strongly, this is how I am and this is how it is. And you can feel that they're in the identity of it. Like it's a very strong identity. That's a problem. But I'm also wary of someone who like vehemently rejects the idea of typology at all. So like there's no typology. I'm free of any box or any constructs. I've got none of them. And I'm like, that's pathology too. And we're seeing a lot of that in the world right now. We're actually starting to see more and more of that kind of identity deconstruction, which is not the healthy approach to me. So like similarly, the Enneagram for me, like you said, it's a system to help people grow out of boxes. It's like typology is a starting point. Typology is it sets a few lines on the page that then you can start making art out of. Before I started teaching this stuff, I was a permaculture teacher and a permaculture designer. And one of the things in permaculture, the hardest site to work with is the blank site. You'd think that would be the easiest. You could be so creative, but it's not until you actually put some definitions on that blank site that the creativity emerges. The most creative sites you can play with are actually suburban environments because there's so many defined edges. There's so many niches to play with. So they're the most creative possible expressions actually. So the more kind of definition you put in place, the more creative expression can emerge. So typology systems for me are putting those defined edges in. I don't want to identify with the edge, but I want to use that edge as a starting point for my own creativity because if I've got a blank space, I don't know about you, but before I started getting into this business and maybe just before I was a permaculture, I was in freeze for quite a number of years about what to do with my life. Because I'm like, I could do anything. I'm intelligent, Yeah, right? You've got the same experience. I'm intelligent, I'm creative. I could do anything. And that would actually put me in a state of distress. I could do anything. What do? I don't know. Just kind of frozen in that, and I think the same is identity. It's like, I could be anyone. It's like, oh God, who do I choose to be then? So I quite like typology systems because it gives me a really good starting point. It's like, okay, here's an edge. It may or may not be true, but let's play with it for a while and see what creative expression emerges from that.
That's the right word, to play with it.
Yeah.
Because if you're rigid, you're not playing.
No,
it's like experimenting, just dipping your toes in it, and let's see what it's like. I think it's also what Enneagram did for me. It showed me my pitfalls. Also, things I thought
really
always felt like, but also the shadow parts of it, of my type. I'm a peacemaker, so like I can read everybody.
You're a 9.
I'm a 9, and. The funny thing is, like, I always forgot about myself. I just wrote a post about it. It's funny. But like to own a no, just to put boundaries down, or to actually think about what I want. It's like, and it was a blueprint that was given to me. Like, this is your growth path. You have to evil virtues. These are your strong suits. These are your shadow sides. Beware of these. And I could spot it when it was happening. Also, a lot of the times I thought I was just weird. I have these weird things that nobody has. And then I was in a panel with 3 other type 9s. And they started telling to an audience about their lives. And I was like, fuck me. You got to be kidding
really
me.
Fun when that happens.
Yeah. And I like these people too, by the way. They're really cool people. I feel at home. So, but then I didn't feel weird anymore, and I had like a sort of a blueprint. Like, okay, you can work from here, and this is the way to work with it, and see what it does for you. So that was like for me the edge. That was a starting point. But if I take it also one step back, what you said about people who are on the edge of like dogmatic and people who reject everything. What I hear in both of them, they have a strong, conviction. They're very rigid in what they believe. They're not flexible. Neither of them.
The other side, the one that rejects everything, gives the appearance of flexibility, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the world we live in today. I think even cancel culture is a part of it. Is a consequence of people going to war like that, or like what's happening right now. It's people that don't want to be wrong anymore. They don't want to think of anymore. And sometimes it feels kind of depressing. And then I get really enthusiastic about work you're doing, because can we just get like Putin and Zelensky in your course or something?
That would be interesting. Whether they'd listen to me or not is another question.
Yeah, and then only do reflective questioning. No debating.
Yeah, no, just reflective listening. Yeah. So I wanted to come back to, there was one point that I was kind of building towards, and I'm just sitting on it because I'm actually really enjoying it inside of myself. And I'm like, I've never spoken this out loud. So it's kind of like a new thought for me. So
hit me.
Just like I criticize the polarity teachings for like saying men cannot actually be vulnerable, they can't be emotional, and that was a great post. There's a lot of great commentary on there. Like people have been adding a lot of richness to that, and I'm actually quite impressed by what's being added to that by a number of different people. And we recognize that actually, so I'm suggesting that kind of mentality creates an entitlement in the feminine and a kind of fantasy orientation towards, and I want to write about this in a context of hypergamy as well, kind of this fantasy orientation towards being rescued by the divine masculine god king, fucking He-Man hero, savior of the world, James Bond type, right? Like every woman thinks that they're going to get that man. It's like some of those men may exist in the world.
Yeah,
yet they're going to be attracted to their equal or better. You're not going to date all the way down, right? Unless there's something in it for them. So everyone thinks that we're going to be the one that's chosen. Like I'm going to be the exception to the rule, and I'm going to find someone who's like 5 steps above me in my league, and they're just going to want me. It's like not quite, right?
No.
So it breeds feminine entitlement, and And that's a problem. And it also puts a heavy burden on men to try and live up to that standard, you know. And I've shouldered that burden before, and it's like, oh, it's exhausting. It's way better to actually become more and more authentic, which includes vulnerability and sometimes collapse. And as that is had space in my relationship, more and more that doesn't even happen. Like, it doesn't need to happen, or it happens in different ways. So anyway, so I'm deconstructing that notion. But I just became aware of, at the same time, we don't want to construct the opposite side that says men should go and be super emotional and collapse and be everything in front of their partners, and like women should just like be with that, you know, because that shifts the entitlement the other direction. It now says, and I've been there before, it says that me as a man, I need a woman who's just going to fully accept me and whatever. It's like, the balanced perspective is actually, we both have work to do, you know, as man and woman, you know, as partners, or, you know, whatever orientation partners we're coming together, we have work to do, and we both have to shoulder that burden equally. And the way that we conduct that work may differ depending on our gender and our polarity or orientation and our attachment style. And they're multivariable. There's not a one size fit all approach, but that approach may differ. But, you know, the general kind of sense that I have here, it's like I said with my partner, when she really surrenders, it naturally polarizes me. So it's like one kind of cue off this is like, as a woman or as the feminine, if the man or the masculine comes in a collapsed or vulnerable state, she doesn't want to go into holding space or mothering or any of those solutions, because these will actually create erosion in the relationship. So there's a way that she can actively work to be in her feminine and still receive and accept him. And this is like the analogy that I think of is, it's like the warrior returning from battle to his wife's hut, you know, his wife's cottage in the village, and he's wounded and he's got cuts all over him. And she's like, I'm so glad to see you come in here. And she tends to him and she bees with him, and he takes as long as he needs to rebuild his strength, and he recovers, and then he's back. You know, it's like that, but psychologically and emotionally, you know, it's the same kind of thing. So that's really a woman's work, right? And in this particular dynamic, there's other dynamics when women are going through their healing process. In this dynamic process, it's a healing process for a man or the masculine to be received in his wound without being met with disdain or judgment or rejection or repulsion, without being fixed or, you know, like coming in with fixing, like, you know, the mother, like my mother was a fixer, right? Whenever I had emotional problems, she wanted to fix me. And for most of my life, I dated women who were fixers, and it fucking drove me insane. I was just doing the same thing over and over again. It's like, I don't want to be fixed. I just want to be heard. You know, it's like, not fix him, right? You know, and not going to space holding. Yeah, fixing is not a good idea. He doesn't need that right now. That's not a healing process, right? Yeah. And not space holding, sitting there and just listening into a vent, because it's what's going to happen is he's just going to start gaining this habitual habit of just venting shit all the time. And she's just going to be holding space. But can she just meet him in her beauty, in her femininity? So that's her side of the work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how does she do that?
How does she do that?
There's probably more women going to be listening to this than men.
Yeah.
So
that's a like similarly that we were saying, that's a kind of a unique, she's going to have to find her own unique way of doing that. Like I'm not going to give a prescription or a formula for that, but there's going to be a unique way that she has to explore what it's like to be in a feminine, how, like, it's like, basically, I would say, if her man is experiencing emotionality, say he's lost his job, or something's happened in his life, or he's just going through a slump, he's feeling depression, something's not working, he's upset because she's done something or whatever. And it's like, how does she do that? So it's like, would be like, firstly, don't do any of those things. And if you do them, catch them and stop and see what comes instead. It's like, oh, I normally go into fixing, I'm not going to fix now. And you sit in the tension of not fixing. So it's going to be really uncomfortable. Sit in the tension of not fixing or not space holding. Don't do the thing that you habitually do, because you'll just keep getting the same outcome. So don't do that. And then see what starts to arise, and see if, for a woman, it's like, literally, how do you let yourself break? It's actually a breaking. It's quite an interesting phenomenon. I've been observing my partner in it. There's like a breaking. Yeah, there's this breaking into surrender. It's almost like he's in collapse. The tendency is to slam the heart shut and like kind of do something about it. I need to do something about it. It's like, how do I actually crack the heart back open and just be open, even though everything's saying, oh God, this is unsafe. Oh, I shouldn't do this. It's like, be in that and see if she can be in the softness and the vulnerability of that and meet him from there and see what happens. You know, that's kind of it. You know, there's practices that I could develop about actually doing that. But for now, that's kind of the major tip that I would put there.
All right.
So I just want to finish this thought as well. I know that my thoughts can be quite long sometimes.
Yeah, but they're good. So
thank you. So that's one side, but we don't want to create a dynamic where that's the dynamic. We don't ever want to have a dynamic that's just becomes the habitual, perpetual dynamic. That's a dynamic that will play out when he needs emotional healing. And she's not healing him. She's simply being with him while he does his healing. And she's receiving him and not rejecting him while he does his healing. Essentially, that's it. So that's her work, right? Now, his side in this particular dynamic is he has to know how to. Yeah, he has to.
You're making my work so easy.
Yeah, he has to know how to do his healing. He has to heal. He can't simply sit in a state of collapse. He has to be actively involved in like questioning himself, being in the introspection. And sometimes healing processes take a while. Like people who struggle with depression, you can go into depression for a little while, you know, weeks or months, you know, depending on, you know, if you're in an invested relationship, the degree to which you're invested is, I think, the degree to which you're going to tolerate, you know, tolerate's not quite the word, be with someone in that process. And if someone is actually actively working through their process, they're having their emotion, but they're able to, like, the woman meets him in it, and then he puts himself back together. You know, he finds a way to, he doesn't vent to her. He doesn't sit and just vomit on her, his emotions or whatever. He's contained his emotional expression, but he's also revealing it. So he's not hiding himself, but he's not just volatile. He's not all over the place and volatile. So he still needs to learn how to work with his emotions in a mature way. Even though it's hard right now and I'm in my process and it's like painful and I don't know what to do and I'm spinning, and, you know, that he's actively putting himself back together. She's not doing it for him and he's not expecting her to do it for him. So he has to be doing that work. And if he can't fully do it right now, that he is seeking help. He is seeking support from other men, you know, from therapists, from coaches, whatever like that. That's really useful to do that work. But that doesn't, and I wasn't saying in the post that he shouldn't do that work, but just that work won't be like doing men's work or doing just working with others outside of the partnership container won't fully heal everything. Some of it will need to be done inside the container. So he needs to know what to bring to the container, and she needs to create it so it's safe enough for him to bring that. And then he can bring that, right? But he's not using the container as a dumping ground. He's not using the relationship as a dumping ground where he's just bleh, and then it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So he's got to do his work on that side of the street too. And then we have a partnership, you know, right? The term partnership. What are we partnering in? You know, for me, the first step you're doing in is, if you're insecurely attached, the first step you're doing is you're partnering in healing each other's attachment systems. That's the partnering work. When that's done, let's go into the next partnership. What's the next project? You know, maybe we're increasing our polarity. Cool. Maybe we're building a family together. Cool. You know, maybe we're like becoming grandparents together. Cool. Like we're partners in life projects, and we run the projects until they're completed through, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because it's you are about relating in relationships. It's not necessarily love or a loving relationship. Yeah. I think things that I've learned in your course, I even apply to my sons. Yeah.
Well, and so it's both and for me. Like I really learned authentic relating because I wanted to get better at dating, but I found that it impacted every part of my life. Every relationship was impacted by the way that I related. And it's like, okay. And so that's not necessarily all that I'm about. Like that was my starting point. I started with, I'm actually, the courses that I'm teaching right now are the last ones I'm going to teach of this course. I'm going to pass it on to other facilitators. I'm ready to move on. And I'm going to spend some time exploring attachment and polarity in the transpersonal space from an intimacy perspective. And I'll do that for a bit. And then actually I'll probably start moving towards community and how do we actually function as a community and create, because that's actually my dream. And my feeling is like community is composed of people who know how to relate well with each other. And community is also built out of couples, which create family units, which allow the community to be populated with children. So how do we work with children and create families? And how do we create a tribe out of that? That's really fascinating. And then how do we work with the ecology and the land? So for me, it's like, it's just one piece on this long journey of work where I end up, and this is my own personal fantasy and desire. This is a journey of work where I end up in a small house, growing a food forest and writing science fiction books and playing with the grandkids. That's where I want to be, in a community of people I love.
Writing science fiction books. I read a story today about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
You're reading that?
No, I didn't read it. I saw the movie, but like the answer to the questions in life and all, what was it? All questions of the universe. The answer was 42. Yeah. But the writer, he did a lot of programming. And in ASCII, the asterisk is named 42, which means it can be anything. Yeah. So anyway, that's a little side note. It was like, I thought that was so awesome. A little detail from the story. But what you just said, I want to move to wrapping it up a little bit. It reminded me of Jocko Willink. Maybe you know him. He's an amazing guy. He works a lot with he's a kung fu guy who wrote a book also for men. And he gives kung fu trainings to kids, and but also he brings in the fathers, and the fathers have to like really create like the safe container for the kids also in the training. It's really powerful. I'll send you a video. It'll make you cry. But he said for men to share their emotions, so like you have to think about what you share, with who you share it, and when you share it. And I thought it was a really good one, because what we were talking about is like a balancing point to, you don't blurt out everything, but you don't want to hold back everything. So do you have any thoughts on that? For instance, when you think about coaches, therapists, men's groups, but also the woman you love, how do you balance these things, and how do you choose what you share with whom and when?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's like, and it really depends on the nature of the container. The relationship with a partner, for me, is a sacred container. It's like, if I'm coming into a relationship with a woman and we're creating a relationship, we're not casual, we're actually creating a relationship. That's a sacred container. So I want to be really mindful of what I bring into that container. Doesn't mean I can't bring my emotion, but I bring it as cleanly as I can, and that's not always going to be super clean. It's not always going to be fully contained, well expressed, but I'm doing my best, and I'm not bringing my shit onto her or into the place. That doesn't mean I can't express emotionally. That doesn't mean I can't show up vulnerably. That doesn't mean I can't collapse and fall apart sometimes, but I can bring that. Now, a men's group would be the nature of the container. What are the rules that we have in that men's group? What is the level of sharing? Do we welcome our deepest, darkest thoughts in that group, or we are a group mostly based on accountability and taking positive action in our life? Men's groups can really vary in their intent. So really it would be based on the rules of the group. What do you share? And then with a therapist, same, it's the container with the therapist. It's like if you're doing psychoanalytic, psychoanalysis work, you may be sharing everything. You may share every single thought that comes into your head, or you may go into some of your most deepest cathartic processes with a therapist. Again, it's the container, but the beautiful thing about a therapist or a coach, is they're the ones who've held you to the agreements, and they're the ones holding the boundaries. So you kind of don't have to. You can find out where your own boundaries are, because they're the ones ideally holding them. They're the ones maintaining them. They're basically creating the power differential, or they're representing the parent that that didn't model to us what we needed, the healing pieces. And sometimes I speak about parents, and I just want to put a little caveat in there. It's like, parents generally doing the best they can, based on their ancestral things. So sometimes I talk about parents, and they're kind of the things that set up our attachment issues. but they were just doing the best they can. So I don't want to demonize them at the same time. It's like, we also got to be honest where a lot of these things came from. They came from kind of lineage type stuff. So therapeutic work may be the container where we can kind of really freely express and explore the biggest parts of ourselves, ideally, if we're working with a good therapist, and then we kind of move down from there. But yeah, like in a relationship container, I think it's really valuable to bring as much as we can. Like, I'm really transparent with my partner, and she's really transparent with me. And, like really fucked up things I keep to myself, like, and everyone has certain, I don't believe there isn't anyone who has very bizarre thoughts and impulses and urges sometimes, like they're present as part of the human psyche. It's whether we act on them is a different thing. And saying them is a form of action. So there are things that we keep to ourselves and we digest and metabolize internally. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's good ending, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that. I love going on geeky rants about this stuff. It's really fun for me.
No, I love joining you in those rants. It's it's so incredibly fascinating. Yeah. I also think I'm talking for myself as a guy. I'm 44 years old right now, and still I feel I'm a novice. Like, I just started this, and I just started exploring it. Well, maybe 10 years ago, but still, it feels very fresh. Like, if you're 10 years old, how grown up are you on certain things? You're not. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank you for showing up here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to connect with you again.
Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to do it more often.
I wish we lived closer. I imagine we'd totally hang out.
Yeah, we would. But you've lived in Europe, right?
No. I was born in France, but I've lived in Australia since I was 18 months. And last time I went to Europe was 21 years ago.
Okay.
So I haven't been in Europe for a long. I have been to the Netherlands, but it was like 21 years ago, 22 years ago. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, I thought you lived in the Pyrenees Mountains. But,
No. There was a story about visiting my cousin there. My cousin was living in the Pyrenees. Yeah. But that was 22 years ago. So.
All right.
I don't know if I'll ever get there again, but maybe I will. Who knows?
Well, you're very welcome here. You can chill out with me and Sophie.
Great. Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work, and people, check out his courses. They're amazing. What is the website again? evolutionaryrelating.com?
.org.
Org. Okay. .org.
Evolutionaryrelating.org.
Yeah, I'm gonna put some links in the description of the podcast, so everybody can go check it out. Highly recommend it. Okay. Thanks a lot, Damien. And we'll see you again.